I warned them it would collapse. I warned them over and over again, but they laughed, called me paranoid, a retired engineer with too much time on his hands. And then one morning, I watched Karen's Lexus sink nose first into the creek she'd buried in concrete. No satisfaction, no gloating. Just that cold, sinking feeling when you realize you were right for all the wrong reasons. It started a few weeks earlier on a crisp fall morning. I was making coffee when I caught that smell, acidic, fake, like plastic, trying to be stone. At first, I thought one of the neighbors was pouring a patio, but when I followed the smell down behind my house, my stomach dropped. The creek, the one I'd listened to every night for 15 years, was gone. In its place was a flat gray slab of wet concrete, jagged at the edges, bubbling as the last of the water tried to escape underneath. I stood there in the mud boots, sinking, just staring. This wasn't construction, it was desecration. Someone had literally poured concrete straight into a natural creek bed. And when I followed the tire tracks up the slope, I didn't even need to guess who was behind it. A sign sat crooked in the dirt, Bridge Construction Do Not Disturb. Karen Whitaker, HOA President. Mid-40s platinum hair, permanent smile that made you feel like she was grading you. She'd been running the neighborhood like a private kingdom since the day she got elected. Fines for unauthorized mailbox colors, citations for overgrown grass. She once threatened to tow a teenager's car for having a bumper sticker she didn't like. And now, apparently, she was playing civil engineer. I went home, pulled out my old property files, maps, surveys, environmental assessments. Sure enough, the creek ran right along my property line. Not HOA land, not even close. This wasn't beautification. It was vandalism. I called the city, tried to get someone in engineering zoning, anyone who could tell me if a permit had been filed. After being transferred half a dozen times, I finally reached a supervisor named Evelyn. She looked up the records and said, "Sir, no permit exists for any bridge project in your neighborhood. If they poured that on your property, they've overstepped." By that afternoon, I was standing face to face with Karen in front of the HOA clubhouse. "You poured concrete into a live creek," I told her, "without a permit." Karen smiled like a teacher indulging a slow student. "The crossing was muddy," she said. "We just wanted a safe walkway. It's an improvement for the community." I stared at her. "You blocked the water flow, Karen. This isn't a walkway, it's a dam waiting to fail. You need to remove it before the next rain, or it's going to collapse." She waved her hand, still smiling. "We'll take it under advisement." That's HOA speak for screw you. 2 days later, the first rain came. Nothing heavy, just a slow, steady drizzle. But by morning, I could already see water pooling behind the slab, backing up under the soil. The creek was choking. I could hear it gurgling, gasping. I knew that sound. I'd heard it in Afghanistan right before a bridge failed and swallowed 2 trucks. I sent Karen photos. No reply. I called the HOA hotline. Straight to voicemail. Then, instead of a response, I got an orange envelope taped to my mailbox. Violation notice, interference with community infrastructure. $350 fine. That's when I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the city would have stepped in if it were really dangerous. Maybe I'd turned into that cranky old guy yelling at clouds. But that night I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window watching the rain gather along the curb, trickling toward the slope behind my yard. The air felt wrong, thick and heavy, like the ground itself was holding its breath. I told myself I'd let it go. But at 2 a.m., flashlight in hand, I walked down to the creek anyway. The slab was slick and shining in the rain, the surface spidered with hairline cracks. And beneath it I could hear water pushing, hissing, clawing for a way out. I took photos, then video. Timestamps, GPS coordinates, measurements. I sent them all to Karen, the HOA board, and Evelyn at the city. My message was short. You were warned. The next morning, Karen doubled down. Flyers in every mailbox, new bridge completed safer. Cleaner, modern. She even hosted a community event that weekend to celebrate the upgrade. Balloons, lemonade, a damn string quartet by the tennis courts. And right in front of everyone, she thanked me for raising awareness about community improvements. That was the moment I stopped being angry and started getting ready. I built a folder, maps, correspondence, HOA bylaws. City codes, even drone footage from last spring showing the original creek. I'd fought wars with less documentation. But the real turning point came when Lydia, one of the quieter board members, knocked on my door late one afternoon. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before speaking. "Karen's planning to drive her car across the bridge tomorrow," she said, "to prove it's safe." I almost laughed. "That slab won't hold a bike, let alone 2 tons of Lexus." "She's invited the press," Lydia whispered. "It's supposed to be a photo op." That night the rain came again. Not a storm, just enough to saturate the clay under the slab. I watched from my porch as puddles formed, the kind that sink deep and make the ground breathe. Around midnight I went down one last time. The water had started seeping under the edges, eroding the soil. It wasn't a bridge anymore. It was a coffin lid. Morning came gray and heavy. I hadn't slept. Around 7:45, my neighbor Melinda ran up my porch steps, breathless. She's doing it right now. I didn't answer. I just grabbed my jacket and followed her down the path. By the time I got there, Karen was standing next to her SUV, beaming like a politician at a ribbon cutting. She wore a pastel pantsuit and rhinestone sneakers, microphone clipped to her lapel, press cameras ready. The slab looked worse than ever, tilted slightly, edges crumbling. Even the caution tape was half buried in mud. Karen raised her hand for silence. Today, she announced, we move forward literally and figuratively. This bridge represents unity and progress. "Karen, stop," I shouted. "The ground's unstable." She smiled directly at me. "Mr. Reeves, some of us choose to have faith." And with that, she got in the car. The engine started. The SUV rolled forward slowly at first, then steadier. The front tires hit the slab, and for a moment it held. The crowd clapped nervously. Then there was a sound I'll never forget, a low, dull pop followed by a deep crack. The concrete bowed, then it broke. The Lexus tilted sideways, wheels spinning, and in the next heartbeat the entire slab gave way. The front dropped the rear, skidded, and the car slid backward into the creek with a splash that sent mud flying up the bank. Everything went silent. Then someone screamed. I was already running. Marco, a young EMT from 2 houses down, sprinted beside me. We slid down the mudwater up to our knees. Karen's window was half down, her hands frozen on the steering wheel, mouth open, but no sound coming out. "She's conscious," I yelled. Marco pounded on the glass, then smashed it with his elbow. The window shattered inward, water gushing in. Karen screamed. "Unlock the door," I shouted. She didn't move. Marco reached in, popped the lock, and together we hauled her out, soaked, shaking, sobbing. By the time the paramedics arrived, she was sitting on the bank, wrapped in a blanket, mascara streaked, whispering, "I'm sorry," to no one in particular. The fire chief took my statement. When I told him I'd been warning the HOA for 2 weeks, he just shook his head. "You got documentation. You'll have it tonight," I said. By evening, the story was on every local channel. HOA, President's car, plunges into creek after unpermitted bridge fails. The footage spread fast, Karen's Lexus dangling in the mud, the broken concrete split like a jawbone. The next day, the city declared the site a hazard. Investigators confirmed everything I'd said: no permits, no engineering review, no drainage. The slab wasn't reinforced. It wasn't even anchored. Karen was suspended for health reasons. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves. A week later, the city fined them $50,000 for environmental violations. Residents demanded a vote. And just like that, the woman who once ruled the neighborhood like a queen was gone. When they asked me to speak at the meeting, I stood up and said, I didn't want this. I didn't want a fight or attention. I just wanted to be heard. And for once they listened. The city crews came back to restore the creek. I helped not because I had to, but because I couldn't stay away. We tore up the remaining concrete, reshaped the banks, planted willows to hold the soil. For weeks I worked alongside neighbors who used to roll their eyes when I talked about erosion. Now they brought gloves and water bottles. When the project was done, the water ran clear again. The cattails came back. Someone built a small wooden sign that read, Silver Grove Creek restored by the Community Fall 2025. Karen sold her house quietly a month later. Word was she'd moved 2 counties away. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Sometimes when I walk down to the creek, I still hear it, the steady rush of water over stone alive again. And I think about how fragile everything is when pride gets poured where patience should have been. You can bury a creek under concrete, but you can't make it obey you. Nature and truth always find a way to break through.